We've all had that moment where traversing a game's world feels more like a chore list than an adventure. You boot up a title, excited to explore, only to find yourself drowning in repetitive tasks, empty landscapes, or endless icons on a map. It's frustrating because the promise of an open world is freedom, the chance to carve your own path, discover secrets, and feel immersed. Yet too often, that promise gets buried under what players call bloat, the kind of content that stretches a world without adding meaningful depth. Fetch quests, oversized maps, and mechanics that exist only to add playtime can turn wonder into weariness. That's why in this video we're going to take a closer look at how open world bloat came to be. First, we'll trace the history of open world design by console generation, highlighting notable games and mechanics that define them. Then we'll weigh the improvements and drawbacks of each era, showing how ambition and technology shaped design choices. Finally, we'll examine how bloat grew into a recurring problem, why it persists, and what lessons can be drawn to fix it. Only after that we will move towards solutions, both new ideas and old systems worth bringing back, so we can rediscover what made open worlds magical in the first place. On the NES, the journey began with The Legend of Zelda 1986. Nintendo under Shigeru Miyamoto introduced a sprawling overworld filled with dungeons and secrets. Hyrule was presented as a grid-based wilderness where every screen had purpose. The intent was to break away from rigid stage-based design and give players freedom to chart their own adventure. It succeeded by balancing openness with density, ensuring discovery without filler. That same year, Metroid 1986 arrived from Nintendo R&D 1. Its labyrinthine world of doors and vertical shafts blended action with exploration. Set on the planet Zebes, the claustrophobic yet integrated design created tension and discovery through backtracking and upgrades. The openness was gated by progression, keeping the world lean and purposeful rather than bloated. Meanwhile, Dragon Quest 1986 from Squaresoft brought the JRPG overworld to life. A left guard was simple, but iconic fantasy land, dotted with towns, caves, and random encounters. The goal was to simulate a living world beyond linear dungeons. Though modest in size, the map was meaningful, each location tied directly to story progression, minimizing excess. A year later, Final Fantasy 1987 expanded the formula further. Square's vision was a larger overworld with airship travel, multiple continents, and layered exploration. It offered a fantasy realm spanning seas, caves, and castles, aiming to give players a sense of epic journey. Though ambitious, the overworld remained compact, with clear narrative anchors preventing unnecessary padding. By the SNES era, Nintendo refined its formula with The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, 1981. Exploration doubled with the Light World and Dark World, yet every screen remained purposeful. Hyrule became richer in detail and secrets, with puzzles and dungeons interwoven seamlessly. The design deepened exploration while layering density instead of expanding emptiness. Square followed with The Secret of Mana 1993, a semi-open world with real-time combat and interconnected regions. Its vibrant fantasy world was accessible by foot, cannon travel, and later a dragon. The intent was to blend freedom with cooperative action RPG gameplay. Its openness was balanced by story beats, though some areas felt sparse compared to Zelda's tighter design. Then came Super Metroid 1984, when Nintendo R&D 1 perfected the Metroidvania formula. Planet Zebes returned larger and more intricate, deepening atmospheric exploration through gated openness. Every area had unique mechanics and secrets, ensuring density over emptiness. Finally, Square's Dream Team delivered Chrono Trigger 1995, a world map spanning multiple areas, each dense with story-driven exploration. From prehistoric times to the distant future, every area was crafted with purpose. Exploration was meaningful through time travel rather than sheer size, avoiding bloat by tying every location to narrative and character arcs. On the PlayStation, Final Fantasy VII 1997 was a landmark. Developed by Square, it introduced a sprawling overworld with towns, continents, and vehicles that gave players a sense of scale far beyond the NES and SNES era. The intent was to create an epic journey that matched its cinematic storytelling. While ambitious, the overworld remained guided by narrative anchors, preventing outright bloat, though its sheer size hinted at the challenges to come. Around the same time, Xenogears 1998 pushed boundaries with layered environments and complex traversal. Square's design aimed to merge philosophical storytelling with exploration, but its vastness sometimes outpaced the density of meaningful content, foreshadowing later issues. On the N64, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time 1998 redefined open-world immersion. Nintendo crafted Hyrule as a living 3D space, where day-night cycles and NPC routines gave the illusion of a breathing world. The intent was freedom and immersion, and it largely succeeded, though some areas, like Hyrule Field, felt empty compared to the dense screens of the earlier Zelda titles. Majora's Mask 2000 followed, shrinking the scale but deepening density. Its looping 3-day cycle turned repetition into design, showing that smaller worlds could feel richer when mechanics reinforced exploration. Meanwhile, Super Mario 64 1996 pioneered hub-based openness. Peach's castle acted as a central overworld, with levels branching out as semi-open spaces. The design intent was freedom of movement, and it succeeded by focusing on mechanics rather than sheer size. On the Sega Saturn, Panzer Dragoon Saga 1998 offered a rare RPG with semi-open exploration. Team Andromeda built a world where flight and narrative intertwined, aiming to rival Square's RPG dominance. Its openness was limited by hardware, but every area carried narrative weight, avoiding filler. Though less expansive than its PlayStation and N64 counterparts, it showed Sega experimenting with density-first design. Finally, Grand Theft Auto 1987 on the PS1 and PC introduced urban open worlds. DMA Design crafted Liberty City as a sandbox of crime and chaos, giving players freedom to roam, steal cars, and cause mayhem. The intent was pure player agency, and while the map was small, it was dense with emergent gameplay. This marked the beginning of open worlds as playgrounds, not just backdrops. On the PlayStation 2, Grand Theft Auto 3 2001 was a revolution. Developed by DMA Design, later Rockstar North, it transformed Liberty City into a living 3D sandbox. The intent was pure player freedom: steal cars, cause chaos, or follow the story at your own pace. It succeeded in immersion, but its sheer openness introduced filler activities that hinted at future bloat. Rockstar expanded further with Grand Theft Auto San Andreas 2004, creating an entire state with cities, countryside, and deserts. The ambition was unmatched, but the scale often outpaced density, leaving stretches of emptiness between meaningful content. Meanwhile, Shadow of the Colossus 2005 took a different approach. Team Eco built a vast, barren landscape intentionally, to emphasize isolation and the weight of each Colossus battle. The intent was atmosphere, not activity. While some players saw emptiness as bloat, others recognized it as purposeful design, showing that not all empty space is a flaw. Final Fantasy X 2001 also experimented with semi-open areas. Square aimed to merge cinematic storytelling with exploration, but its world was more segmented than expansive, avoiding bloat by keeping progression tightly guided. On the Xbox, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind 2002 defined the era's ambition. Bethesda crafted Vardenfell as a massive, hand-built world with unparalleled freedom. The intent was immersion through choice, but the sheer scale introduced uneven pacing, some areas dense with quests, others vast and empty. It was groundbreaking, yet also the first clear case where ambition risked overwhelming players. Later, Fable 2004 offered a more compact alternative. Lionhead Studios designed Albion as a semi-open world where player choices shaped outcomes. The intent was density and consequence, and while smaller in scale, it avoided much of the bloat that plagued larger titles. On the GameCube, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker 2002 showcased Nintendo's take on openness. Its oceanic overworld was vast, dotted with islands to explore. The intent was freedom and discovery, but the sailing mechanic stretched playtime, and many players felt the ocean was too empty. It was a clear example of how scale without density could feel like bloat. Later, Metroid Prime 2002 offered a more balanced design. Retro Studios crafted Talon 4 as integrated regions, blending exploration with atmosphere. The intent was immersion through density, and it succeeded by keeping every area purposeful. On the Xbox 360, The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion 2006 set the tone for the generation. Bethesda crafted Cyrodiil as a massive detail world with radiant AI and countless quests. The intent was immersion through scale and freedom, but the sheer number of repetitive dungeons and fetch quests revealed how filler could dilute wonder. Its successor, Skyrim 2011, refined the formula with a more atmospheric world and emergent gameplay. While praised for freedom, it still leaned heavily on repetitive quest structures, showing how bloat had become normalized. On the PlayStation 3, Assassin's Creed 2 2009 expanded Ubisoft's vision of historical open worlds. Renaissance Italy was stunningly detailed, with climbing, exploration, and collectibles driving gameplay. The intent was immersion through historical authenticity, but the sheer volume of feathers, viewpoints, and side missions introduced checklist fatigue. Later, Red Dead Redemption 2010 from Rockstar brought an American frontier to life. Its vast plains and towns created a cinematic experience, but long stretches of emptiness and repetitive side content highlighted the tension between atmosphere and activity. Meanwhile, Fallout 3 2008 on the Xbox 360 and PS3 reimagined post-apocalyptic Washington, D.C. as a sprawling wasteland. Bethesda aimed for freedom and emergent storytelling, and while it succeeded in atmosphere, the sheer scale often left players wandering through repetitive ruins. Far Cry 2 2008 on the Xbox 360 and PS3 also leaned into openness, with Ubisoft crafting an African savanna filled with dynamic firefights. The intent was realism, but constant respawning enemies and repetitive missions turned immersion into frustration, a clear case of bloat undermining design. On the PC, open worlds flourished in unique ways. World of Warcraft 2004 had already shown how massive multiplayer worlds could thrive, but during this era, expansions like the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King pushed scale and density further. Blizzard's intent was to create a living, social world, but the sheer grind of quests and repetitive dungeons revealed how bloat could creep into MMOs. Meanwhile, The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings 2011 offered a more narrative-driven open world. CD Projekt Red aimed for density and consequence, crafting smaller but richer zones. It avoided much of the bloat by focusing on story, setting the stage for The Witcher 3. On the other end, Minecraft 2009 introduced procedurally generated worlds of infinite scale. Mojang's intent was creativity and freedom, and while its openness was limitless, the lack of guided density meant that players had to create their own meaning, a different kind of challenge to bloat. On the Wii, Nintendo took a different path. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess 2006 offered a semi-open world with cinematic storytelling. Its intent was to merge classic Zelda density with modern scale, but some areas felt stretched thin compared to earlier entries. Later Xenoblade Chronicles 2010 pushed the Wii's limits with massive landscapes and interconnected zones. Monolith Soft aimed for epic scope, and while groundbreaking, its sheer size sometimes outpaced meaningful density, foreshadowing the challenge of modern RPGs. On the PlayStation 4, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt 2015 became the gold standard for narrative-driven open worlds. CD Projekt Red crafted sprawling regions filled with quests, characters, and lore. The intent was immersion through story density, and while praised, some players noted repetitive side quests and monster contracts as signs of bloat. Horizon Zero Dawn 2017 followed, offering a visually stunning post-apocalyptic world. Guerrilla Games aimed for spectacle and freedom, but its reliance on collectibles and repetitive encounters highlighted the tension between beauty and filler. On the Xbox One, Halo Infinite 2021 marked the franchise's shift into open-world design. 343 Industries built Zeta Halo as a semi-open ring, aiming for freedom of approach. While praised for combat, its repetitive outposts and objectives showed how bloat could creep into even iconic series. Earlier, Sea of Thieves 2018 offered a shared multiplayer world. Rare's intent was emergent gameplay, but its vast ocean often felt empty without player-driven activity, echoing Wind Waker's ocean problem from years before. On the PC, open worlds diversified further. Cyberpunk 2077-2020 promised a dense urban sandbox, with CD Projekt Red aiming for verticality and immersion. While visually striking, its filler-side content and technical issues revealed how ambition could collapse under its own weight. Meanwhile, Minecraft continued to thrive, showing how infinite procedural worlds avoided traditional bloat by letting players define meaning. MMOs like Guild Wars 2 also refined density-first design, balancing massive maps with dynamic events to reduce repetitive grind. On the Nintendo Switch, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2017 redefined open-world philosophy. Nintendo's intent was player-driven exploration, stripping away checklist markers and letting curiosity guide discovery. Its shrines, physics-based puzzles, and emergent gameplay avoided traditional bloat by making exploration meaningful. Later, Pokemon Legends Arceus 2022 experimented with semi-open zones. Game Freak aimed to modernize Pokemon exploration, but repetitive tasks and sparse areas showed how handheld design still wrestled with filler. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 2017 also pushed the Switch's limits, offering massive landscapes with layered systems. While ambitious, its sheer scale sometimes outpaced density, echoing the challenges of earlier generations. On the PlayStation 5, Horizon Forbidden West 2022 pushed Guerrilla's vision further, with breathtaking visuals and a massive map. The intent was immersion through spectacle, but its reliance on collectibles and repetitive encounters showed how bloat persisted even in next-gen titles. Final Fantasy XVI 2023 shifted towards semi-open zones rather than one massive world. Square Enix aimed for narrative density, showing a conscious move away from sprawling filler, a sign that developers were beginning to rethink scale. On the Xbox Series X and S, Starfield 2023 became Bethesda's most ambitious project yet. With hundreds of planets, the intent was limitless exploration, but the sheer scale often outpaced density, leaving many worlds barren. It highlighted how ambition can magnify bloat when content doesn't match scope. On the PC, diversity remained unmatched. Baldur's Gate 3 2023 from Larian Studios offered a dense, choice-driven world, proving that narrative depth can counteract bloat. Its intent was consequence-rich exploration, and it succeeded by keeping every area meaningful. PC also continued to thrive with MMOs like Final Fantasy XIV, offering either infinite procedural worlds or dense social ecosystems, two very different approaches of avoiding or embracing scale. On the Nintendo Switch, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom 2023 built upon Breath of the Wild's philosophy. Nintendo doubled the verticality with sky islands and underground caverns, aiming for emergent exploration. While praised for creativity, some players noted shrined repetition and filler tasks creeping back in. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet 2022 attempted a fully open-world Pokemon experience. Game Freak's intent was freedom, but technical issues and repetitive objectives revealed how handheld design still struggles with scale. Meanwhile, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 2022 continued Monolith Soft's tradition of massive landscapes, ambitious but sometimes overwhelming in scope. Looking back across these generations, it's clear that open-world design has evolved through cycles of ambition, innovation, and compromise. Each era brought breakthroughs, from the compact density of the NES and the SNES, to the sprawling ambition of the PS2 and the Xbox, to the cinematic spectacle of the PS3 360 era, and finally the visual peaks of the modern consoles and PC. Yet alongside these advances, the same tension kept resurfacing: freedom versus filler, density versus emptiness. With the Nintendo Switch adding handheld diversity and PC offering unmatched flexibility, the stage is now set to step back and ask the bigger question: how did these patterns shape the issue of bloat, and what trends can we uncover across the decades? In the earliest generations, open worlds were compact and dense. The NES and SNES relied on limited hardware, so every screen or overworld tile had to carry meaning. Exploration was guided, and filler was rare. By the PS1 and 64 era, ambition grew. Worlds became larger, 3D spaces introduced freedom, and mechanics like day-night cycles or hub-based exploration gave players new ways to engage. Yet cracks began to show. Hyrule Field felt empty compared to earlier Zelda maps, and overworlds in RPGs sometimes stretched thin. The seeds of bloat were planted here, as developers experimented with scale but hadn't yet mastered density. With stronger hardware, ambitions exploded. GTA 3 and San Andreas turned cities and states into sandboxes, while Morrowind and Oblivion offered massive, handcrafted worlds. The intent was freedom, but filler crept in. Repetitive quests, empty stretches, and checklist fatigue became common. Developers leaned on scale as a selling point, but density often lagged behind. By the PS3 360 era, open worlds became the industry standard. Assassin's Creed, Fallout 3, and Red Dead Redemption dazzled with spectacle, but also normalized repetitive side content. PC added diversity. MMOs like World of Warcraft and sandboxes like Minecraft showed different approaches, yet both wrestled with grind or emptiness. This era cemented bloat as part of the genre's DNA. Modern open worlds reached their visual peak. The Witcher 3 and Horizon dazzled with detail, but still leaned on filler quests and collectibles. Developers began experimenting with semi-open zones to counteract bloat, as seen in Final Fantasy XVI. Yet ambition remained. Starfield's hundreds of planets showed how a limitless scale can magnify emptiness. On PC, Baldur's Gate 3 proved density-first design could succeed, while Cyberpunk highlighted how ambition can collapse under filler. The Nintendo Switch added handheld diversity, with Breath of the Wild redefining exploration by stripping away checklists, though later titles like Pokemon Scarlet Violet showed handhelds weren't immune to bloat. Across these generations, the tension sharpened: freedom versus filler, spectacle versus substance. From the analysis, it's clear that unchecked ambition often leads to filler. One way forward is to design smaller worlds with denser content, where every location carries narrative or mechanical weight. Instead of sprawling maps filled with repetitive tasks, developers can focus on compact regions laid with meaning, much like Baldur's Gate 3 or Majora's Mask. Another promising approach is hybrid design, blending procedural generation with handcrafted anchors. Procedural systems can provide scale and variety, but handcrafted quests, landmarks, and story beats ensure exploration remains purposeful. Equally important is shifting away from static checklists towards dynamic, emergent systems. NPC routines, evolving ecosystems, or player-driven consequences can generate replayable content without feeling like chores. These innovations don't just reduce bloat, they transform exploration into curiosity-driven play, where freedom feels alive rather than obligatory. At the same time, older design philosophies offer lessons worth revisiting. Semi-open zones, for instance, can be reintroduced as a way to balance freedom with pacing. Instead of one endless map, segmented regions allow developers to craft unique mechanics and density for each area, as seen in Final Fantasy XVI's approach. Another returning idea is purposeful emptiness, vast landscapes used intentionally to emphasize atmosphere or emotion, rather than accidental filler. Shadow of the Colossus and Breath of the Wild showed how emptiness can heighten immersion when paired with meaningful traversal systems. Reinventing these older methods means not discarding scale, but rethinking how it serves the player. By combining modern innovations with proven systems, developers can create worlds that feel expansive yet meaningful, ambitious yet disciplined. Tracing the journey of open worlds across generations reveals a cycle of ambition and compromise. What began as compact, purposeful maps grew into sprawling landscapes, often at the cost of density. The analysis showed how Bloat became embedded in the genre's DNA, and the solutions outlined ways forward, both through new innovations and reinventing older systems. Together, they highlight that Bloat is not inevitable. It is a design choice, one that can be avoided when freedom is balanced with meaning. The challenge now lies in how developers will respond. Will they continue chasing limitless scale, risking repetition and emptiness, or will they embrace smaller worlds, emergent systems, and purposeful design? The Nintendo Switch proved handhelds can deliver massive experiences, while PC continues to showcase diversity from MMOs to narrative-rich RPGs. Yet across all platforms, the same question remains: how do we ensure that exploration feels rewarding, not exhausting? Perhaps the future of open worlds depends less on how big they become, and more on how deeply they engage us. If developers can learn from past missteps and apply both new and old solutions, then the genre may finally move beyond its struggle with bloat. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. If a game is defined by freedom, how can we make sure that every step, every choice, and every discovery truly matters? Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe everyone. Bye for now.